Sometimes you just have to bite a man's face to make them remember who you are. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. A bit delayed on this. Again, if you haven't paid attention to some of my other reviews, I was at a wedding, so everything sort of got pushed back this week. I also am fighting a head cold that I got from said wedding and playing, so if I sound a little different than I normally do, my apologies. The old man is back after a bit of a hiatus and a bit of a health scare for Jeff Bridges. Let me say this. I think this show last season, first season, started off extremely strong. I think the first 2 to 3 episodes of this first season are simply phenomenal. And I think it has been chasing its tail sort of ever since. It's still a really good show. But I'm going to account some of the issues that the back half of the season having occurred with them having to wrap things up a little quickly because they had to work around Jeff Bridges' health. And so I've been going into this season with a bit of a hopefulness that we can sort of return to form and get a little bit back to what we were doing at the front of that first season. I will say that these first 2 episodes that they've released, episode 8 and number 8 and 9, that's what they're calling them. They're just Roman numeraling these. It's good. It's not fully back to where it was on 1 and 2 and 3, but it's good. They released these 2 episodes together for a reason. They are pretty much happening at the same time. They're happening in real time with each other. One of them follows Dan, Jeff Bridges, and Harper, which, by the way, first season, we didn't get to really have the two of them interact that much on the screen together. They were talking on the phone. They knew of each other outside of this, but there was never any chemistry or scenes together. This season, just in the first episode alone, they've given us all the droves that I need to have the two of them together. And like when you have 2 great actors like that together, just even small facial mannerisms say so much. And so it's good to have the two of them on screen together. But the 2 episodes are Dan and Harper trying to get to Emily, and then the other is Emily and Hamzat sort of figuring out what it is that their relationship are, and they're happening at the same time. So it's a smart way to release the 2 of these together. I think what's important to note, this show is listed as a thriller, not an action thriller. I think that's where I think the first couple episodes of this series made it feel like we were going to have more action sequences than that we got. When we got away from that, we're now in the tail end, and then we got the beginning of this where there's not that many action beats that happen. So once you wrap your head around what the show actually is versus what you thought it was going to be, I think you'll enjoy it a little bit more. This first episode, episode 8, picks up right at the end of last episode where Dan and Harper go to Afghanistan to sort of figure out how they can find and catch up with Emily. I'm going to use Emily as her name. I know she has like 3 different names. Most people do in this show. Actually, Dan has like 4. But just so that we can have an understanding of who the hell I'm talking about, it's going to be Emily. So Harper, they're in the back of this truck that they are trying to get over the border to Afghanistan. They're in the back of this truck being sort of cargoed in. And Harper is trying to get Dan to talk about like stories for Emily, like to sort of like piece things together for her, because he has just now realized that Emily is the daughter of Hamzat, and not really the daughter of Dan. And so he's like, you need to come up with these stories and tell her all these stories to sort of create a world for her to give her all the aspects of her life. And Dan's like, we don't have time to do that. We need to have our head in the game right now. You are trying to think of everything as far as being linear or rational. You're thinking as a cop. Here in Afghanistan, no one cares about any of that. So shut the hell up. Stop that. What we know is that 3 weeks have passed since Emily has gone here, and so they've been on this trove and this trip for quite some time. And Dan is just like, we need to get to her as fast as we possibly can. The truck is then attacked by pirates who are trying to just steal whatever cargo that this thing has, and they're attacked, shot at. The driver that was driving them is killed, and then they are also killed. So Harper and Dan get off the truck, see the carnage that sort of ensued. Dan's just shooting anybody. If anybody looks like they're alive, I'm killing them. I'm shooting them again. Make sure they're dead. Harper's like, stop shooting people. You don't know what I want. Stop shooting people. But Dan is kind of at the point where, like, hey, he may have gotten where we're going from the driver, so he needs to die so that he can't give up our thing. But essentially, Dan's like, we don't know where we're going. You need to call her. And he keeps referring to her. He's not saying who her is. We learn later that it's his first wife, Marion, played by Jenny McTeer, voiced here. But he's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that yet. So Harper reaches into the car and he gets a GPS tracker, which to the location they were going to go to. And it's got the marker on there. I was like, okay, cool. So they get in the truck and they drive off. Now, this whole time Harper's kind of saying, like, hey, do you remember being here? Like, is it all coming back to you now? Do you remember being this? Because, like, this used to be your lay of the land. Do you remember it all? And Dan's kind of just like, it's some of it coming back to me. I get some of it, yeah. But Dan realizes that, hey, even if we get to this meet in the spot, the person that we're supposed to meet up with, we don't have that connection anymore because it's just two white folks walking into a Afghanistan refugee spot. Like, this doesn't seem, it's going to be a bad way. And so they get to this point where there's a fork in the road where they can go left, which is where the meeting spot is located on the GPS tracker, or they can go right. Dan's gut tells them to go right, and they do happen upon sort of a station, if you will. Harper's kind of like, so you do still have it. They go in, and it gets real dicey for them real fast, as you would imagine that it would. Two very white guys walking to an Afghan holding like a refugee area, they're going to be executed immediately. And they're taken outside and are about to be killed when Omar shows up to say, hey, no, leave them be, let them be. I'm here to meet with them. Where is their contact person? He's like, yeah, he's dead. It's like, okay, well, got it. And they're like, well, there's a person that we need to get back from and taken back. They're goods that we need to get taken back. And he's like, well, we're not hired soldiers. That's not how we operate here. And he's like, but it's with Hamza. And the second that says Hamza, everything sort of clicks for him immediately. We learn more as we go along why. Clicks for him immediately. And he's like, all right, cool. I got it from here. And he sort of shows them all it is that Hamza is currently doing within this world right now. He lets them know that Hamza was once regarded as a hero in this land, but now he is this middleman between government, between the Taliban, and he plays both of them like a fiddle. And he is allowed to be the only area that the U.S. don't sanction. So he's able to sort of operate in this nebulous that no one else gets to operate in, and it sort of has made him this figure that a lot of people like to bring down. So they're off riding. They're riding along, and they keep having to have pit stops for Harper because he keeps having to pee. And on this second or third, how many never, pit stop, Omar comes up to Dan and is kind of like, well, hold on. I have a question. He is not built for this world. I don't know why you chose him as a partner, but he's not built for this world. You, however, are. And it feels like you may have been here before. It reminds me of this story. And it's clear that he's fishing. He's fishing. We don't know why, but he's clearly fishing. But he says, like, there's a story about this American that used to live here, used to be a guide or a friend of Hamza, and somehow escaped. But he was this big bad boogeyman that everybody sort of knew. And he asked him straight up, like, "Are you the one in that story?" And in a real roundabout way, he kind of just says, "Cool story, bro." Like he cool story bros him. He's like, "Yeah, cool story, bro." He doesn't acknowledge or deny, but he just says, "Cool story, bro," which sort of is an admission of like, "Yeah, that's me." Um, We do also see a flashback, one of the first flashbacks of the season, where uh, young Dan is meeting with Abby, and Abby's kind of just like, look, I don't care what you have to do, and I know this may not be the right thing, but you need to get Emily, I'm going to call her that, out of this country and away from Hamzat immediately. I don't want her to know where she came from. I just want her to start over fresh. I also don't want you to tell her anything about Hamzat, and I don't want her to return to Hamzat at any point in time because it's going to put her life in danger. So he is truly doing this and moving in this way at his age because he's made a promise to Abby at such a young age. So in present day, Omar, Dan, and Harper get to a camp that has just been laid out. Everybody's been murdered. You can see that Omar feels a type of way about all of this. His body hangs from a tree. The residents are all massacred. It's finally at this point that Dan says, hey, you need to call her. And Harold's like, all right, I will. So he goes off and calls Marion. And he catches her up on what's going on. It's like, hey, look, real quick. If you're able to help us any further, I know you helped us a lot already. If you can help us any further, we greatly appreciate it. It's like, cool, I can. It's just going to be a little bit of time. And I know you're already out there, but it's going to be a minute before I can get stuff to you. And she says, while you're there, why don't you ask Ali for a safe place to hide? Because I think that's going to be your best option in the interim. And at that point, that Harper's kind of like, well, who the hell is Ali? And he realizes that quickly that Omar is a double agent and not who he proclaims to be. And so he is trying to make a beeline back to Dan, who Omar is also now re-interrogating and asking more questions. And he's like, real quick, who is she? And he's like, what were you talking about? Who is the person that you're trying to get? Like, who is she? Who is she? And he gets really pushy about it. And then he follows that up with, who are you? And after a bit of a stare down, they begin to fight. They're going at it for a little bit to the point where Omar gets the upper hand on Chase. And he's straddling him on top of him, his arms pinned down, and he stabs him the blade pretty deep in his chest. It's at that point that Danson's like, hey, I'm one of the worst monsters that you can think of. And he bites his face. Like, just takes a big chunk out of his face. Like, I'm gonna eat your face. Then he takes the blade that he had out of his chest and just slices him across the face. Basically in his eye. He loses an eye. It's at that point that Harper is coming on horseback. He grabs Dan and they ride off. As they ride off, three of Omar's men, the rest of the Taliban, are on bikes following them. And Omar's kind of standing there like, what the hell? As the bikes follow them, they see the horse has been left alone, and the two of them are off in the caves in the mountains, which is an area, I guess, that Abby was aware of, and sort of had given Dan previously. So they're in the caves. They're talking. They're discussing. It's basically a point to get respite, to get a bit of a repair because Dan's in a bad way, and sort of just think about things. At this point, that Dan's like, you need to get up out of here. Like, this isn't for you. This isn't long for you. You should leave. Call your family and get out of Dodge. And Harper was kind of like, I was wondering when this was going to take place. I was wondering when you didn't think that I should be here or be around enough to help on this mission. So at that point, the Dan's kind of just like, hey, look, I think Emily's dead already. Like, and the reason why I'm so angry and why I'm such a begrudging person is because I think Hamzat's already killed her. I think Emily will remind Hamzat so much of Abby that he's just going to remove her immediately. Now, I've seen the second episode, so I know it's not, but immediately I thought this was a bit of a stretch. I didn't see a world where Hamzat would get his daughter back to him just to kill her. That seems odd to me. But it gets interesting in that next episode. Harper accuses Dan of being scared. You're just a chicken to see Emily again and have to explain all the things that we've sort of done to protect her, give her a life, and not told her. Like, and I think you just don't want to face up to those realities. Harper then goes to call his wife, just to tell her that he's going to be on this trip a little bit longer. He's not leaving Dan, especially not in the state that he's in now. He's just saying, hey, this trip's going to take a little bit longer than I originally thought. My apologies. He then learns that there's a bit of an issue back home, and so he's now like, okay, well, we gotta speed this piece up. We then see Dan having a bit of a vision. He's laying down, he wakes up, he has a bit of a vision, and he sees young Hamzat standing over him, kind of taunting him. He then snaps out of it, wakes up, and we see old Hamzat coming to the camp, standing over him with a gun. And then we pan out and we hear a gunshot. And that's how the end of that episode ends. Pick up immediately with the second episode, episode 9, which happens in real time parallel to this last episode, where Emily shows up to Hamzat's camp and is treated like a prisoner, put into a jail cell. Hamzat's right-hand woman, Khadijah, who we learn real quick that she's the one actually running things here, which usually is the case. Women get shit done. But it's immediately told to her by Khadijah that, hey, yo, you were stolen from this land by your mother and a white dude that was a guest here. You are truly the daughter of Hamzat. And she's like, well, then let me go talk to Hamzat. If that's the truth, let me go have a conversation with him. She's like, nah. She just leaves. She comes back maybe a day later. Time really isn't a thing or really told to us how much time passes within this episode. We know 3 weeks pass because of what happens in Harper and Dan's episode, but we really don't know quite the days to happen. But Khadijah comes back with a projector, and the projector, when she turns it on, has video of Hamzat with the very young Emily. And she immediately breaks down because she realizes that what Khadijah said was true. She starts breaking down, and then she immediately wants to play it over again. Now, mind you, while she's playing it over again, Hamzat's like off to this away, seeing the prison cell and seeing that it lights back up, knowing that she's playing this clip more than once. And so, at least in some way, she now understands, knows, and it resonates with her who she truly is. And he sort of starts humming a little nursery rhyme song that he said to her as she was once a child. The next day, or however the time works here, she goes to go see Hamzat. Khadijah takes her to go see Hamzat, and it's not the best meeting. Emily just wants to know who Abby was. Like, hey, I need to get some sort of reflection of who my mom was. Because she was a bitter, hateful, angry old woman by the time that I got to her. And I want to know what positives she had. Like, there's got to be something positive to her, something that made her who she was before that. And you might be the key to sort of have that. Hamzat's like, yeah, I'm not giving you that. It's in that he also asks, like, why did you come here? And he's like, I wanted to know where I come from. And he's like, okay. But what she really wants to know is how she and or Abby fit into this world. But yeah, after she asks, like, hey, tell me one good thing about my mom, Hamzat just dips out, walks off. We then see, this is where the episode catches up with the previous episode, we then see Omar before his face modifications. We see Omar, and he comes to Hamzat to offer up his services to help with the situation and to help with Hamzat's guest that he is sort of aware of. Hamzat plays dumb, like, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about, but he's like, okay, cool, I know you have a guest here. They throw threats at each other very thinly, and as Omar is leaving, he informs Hamzat that Dan and Harper are here searching for her or whoever you may have. Hamzat tells Khadijah of this, and Khadijah's kind of like, we're now in this shit or get off the pot. It's just sort of scenario. You either have to let her go, and if you do that, we put ourselves at risk, or you have to go in there and kill her. We don't have many options. Bringing Emily here put us in jeopardy because Now there are more eyes on us. The U.S. is now, whatever sanctions we were being given may be being released because we now have a U.S. citizen here. She's a liability, and we need to make a decision. Hamzat then decides, all right, I got the way to go ahead and do this. I'm going to take this gun and go into her prison cell and kill her. He goes into the cell with a gun and he says, you are just like your mother. And he holds her at gunpoint. And it's at that point that Emily lays into her with a gun to her head. It's like, you are a coward. You are too much of a coward to ask whatever it is you want to know about me. You're too much of a coward to actually give me the information. You're too much of a coward to understand me or to learn about me. She lays into him to the point where the two of them start going to blows and beating each other like they are not father and daughter, beating each other like they are two dudes fighting over the last steak. And they haven't eaten in weeks. They beat the crap out of each other. Emily eventually gets the upper hand and she goes to get the gun and she holds Hamzat at gunpoint. And she calls him a coward for not being able to kill her. But she can't do it either. At the end of the day, it is still her father, and he still holds, not father, dad. Well, I guess father. Dad would be Dan. But he is the father. But he also still holds answers to questions that she needs to have answered before she can sort of feel holding it. Khadijah comes in and sees the two of them in bloody mess. Like, what in the blue hell is going on here? It's at that point that we really learn that Khadijah is in complete control here. So she takes Emily and is like, all right, this isn't working. We're going to try this a different way. So he takes her into a house with three women. They're like her cousins. They're Emily's actual cousins. To patch her up and basically bring her back to life, get a new approach. Emily tries to get information from Khadijah, and Khadijah's kind of like, you're not asking the correct questions. You're angry, and you're understandably, you have a right to be. But the questions you're asking are not the ones that are going to lead you to the answer that you need. So you need to ask different questions. And when you are prepared to ask different questions, I will be here. You'll know where to find me, and we can make that happen. It's at that point that Khadijah is informed that Abby is dead, which no one sort of there knew. They thought Abby was still alive. Emily sort of creates a bond with Farouza's son, Farouk, and they become almost like Mutt and Jeff. That's an old saying. I just dated myself. My apologies. But they become real close. She's teaching him language and all this stuff. And then she learns that his father was killed fighting back against the Taliban, but that the Taliban retreated once Hamzat stepped in. And so that's why they feel comfortable here, because Hamzat sort of helped them out. Which, I will say this, that first season sort of presented Hamzat as being the worst human being on the planet. This episode does more to undo that, to say, not necessarily undo that, but to say that he's a gray area person, that he does have some sympathetic natures, he has some humane natures, but he will do what it takes to get what it is he wants, which is not very different than Dan. It's just Dan's our protagonist, so we kind of lean towards that. We then pick up in real time with the last episode, and now we see Omar, who's a pirate now, because he got his eye sliced out and he got a chunk of face removed. He has now had his modifications from courtesy of Dan done, but he goes to his bosses to tell him that, hey, look, Hamzat's been lying to us. There is an American in his holding spot in their custody. And he said that the Taliban has decided to take a firmer hand with their business. So we're going to go ahead and let's go have a conversation with Hamzat now. Because Khadijah is just about her business and always sort of ahead of things, she goes to one of the work sites and sees that like work has stopped and that there are now Taliban sort of around the U.S. deposits and the lithium deposit. She hops on the phone with somebody in America. Is like, hey, real quick, you guys said that you weren't doing any U.S. sanctions here. Whatever assurance has been put into place seems to have been being violated. What are we doing? And I think the word of a U.S. person being there has sort of given any sort of tight knit that they had is release those. So Hamzat goes into Emily's stead and says, "Hey, look, we got to get out of here. It's not safe for you here." And he goes to get her. When he goes to get her at the front door of his camp, Omar is there with several folks and guns to say, "I know Hamzat lied. So we need to talk to him. We need to come in there and have a conversation with him." And he's just like, "You're not going to do that." Then Omar is like, "I'm not taking no for an answer. I'm going to come in there." And he's just like, "Okay, fine. Then we'll let you in." And she just opens the gates and brings them in. She brings them into a sector of the camp that is a trap. They arrive and they're at gunpoint several ways, where that pisses Omar off more. Because Omar is like, "We would have been perfectly fine just taking Hamzat. Like, that's all we wanted, and then we would let you guys all do your thing. You've now thrown an arrow across the bow, and now I want to burn this place down. And so when you put your guns down, I'm going to make every boy here a part of the Taliban. Like every boy here, young boy here, is going to be a part of this from going forward because you have waged war against me, and you have made this far worse than it had to be." We don't see anything else that happens there, but I feel like bloodshed going to happen there. Somebody's going to die. But we end up with Hamzat and Emily on horseback going to the mountains, the same mountains that Abby once told Dan about. She takes him to the caves. The caves are the same caves that Dan and Harper are in. As they walk, he's hearing Emily talk to her, but he's playing it off in his head, his imagination, as if she's a young girl. Mind you, I think this is how Hamzat sort of relates to Emily. It's like, I see her as being a child, a young person. Um, and I don't respect her as an adult, sort of. He confesses he brought her to Afghanistan for a sense of closure. It was like, I knew you were there, and I just wanted closure on that piece of my life. And he finally decides to have a conversation about her mother. And he says, "Look, here's the one thing that I can say to you. Abby taught me that you can either love someone, or you can fully love someone, or you can fully trust someone. But you can't do both." And Emily's kind of like, I call BS. You can do both. And Hamzat's like, I am glad that you are at a part of your life where you can still live in the naivete of saying that that is not the case. And I'm glad that life has not destroyed you enough to know that you have to choose one. But when that happens, just be prepared. I have a feeling, don't know when, don't know where, that line of whether you can love someone fully or trust someone fully is going to come back uh, at the end of this season somehow. It's going to rear its head somewhere in relation to probably her relationship with Dan. That said, Hamzat hears a sound in the caves and he goes to investigate it. Next thing we hear is a gunshot. The gunshot that we heard at the end of the first episode sort of comes back around and plays one more time here. Emily goes into the caves to look what happened, and we just get a reaction shot of her face sort of kind of saddened, confused, a little bit of hope. But we don't get an answer until next week. But I think that's a good twofer and a good sort of catch up for us as a whole. So we spent a lot of time last season with everyone being separated. So now we seem to be off to a races this season with just everybody together. So to have everybody together at the end of the third episode, at the start of the third episode, is going to be fascinating. It's going to be interesting to see. Hamzat knows that he needs to get Emily the hell out of Afghanistan because now the world is starting to sort of close in on her, and Omar is sort of leading this charge to get a hold of her. It's going to be up to Hamzat to be like, "Hey, the two of you are the only two people that I can trust to get her up out of here. I need you guys to do so." I think that's what's going to end up happening. It's like, "Hey, I don't want to trust you, but I need you to do what you did before and get her out of here because it's not safe for her here." Good first two episodes. Not as good as the first two episodes of the first season, but it's a good coming back. We get a couple action beats. I think the scene with Omar and Dan was good, but I think the battle between Hamzat and Emily was even stronger. It's much more visceral, much more angry. You can tell there's emotion, hate, a lot of years of frustration coming out in that fight, and you felt it all there. It's a lot of good character work that's happening in these first two episodes, and I'm glad that it's back. I'm glad that Jeff Bridges is healthy enough to do it again. And yeah, Old Man season 2, we're here. What did you guys think about the first two episodes of the Old Man season 2? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any other place podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.